Welcome back to the broadcast. This is the Equally Yoked Show. Glad to have you back again for another crazy news story that we are just beginning to. It was breaking this morning, but Pam Bondi is fired as Attorney General. Now, you've probably been, looking at most of the folks that are, on top of this stuff. This is not new. So this is breaking news, maybe for those that are just joining in and they don't really watch the news. They don't really follow the news carefully. Now, what we've been witnessing here is today, April 2nd, Donald Trump ousted Attorney General Pam Bondi on Thursday afternoon, mounting frustration with her performance, especially over the release of files on late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Trump also felt Bondi was not moving quickly enough to prosecute critics and adversaries whom he wanted to face criminal charges, according to sources. Now, they don't mention these sources. However, this is Donald Trump's response concerning Pam Bondi, which let's take a look and you maybe will come to your own conclusions concerning what Reuters is saying. But it says Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend. Look, we'll comment on this in a moment here as to why this sort of language seems different from what Reuters is posting versus what Donald Trump is posting. But here he says, a loyal friend who faithfully served as my attorney general over the past year. Pam Bondi did a tremendous job overseeing a massive crackdown in crime across our country, with murders plummeting to their lowest level since 1900. We love Pam, and she will be transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. And our Deputy Attorney General and a very talented and respected legal mind, Todd Blanche, will step in to serve as acting Attorney General. Now, the speculation surrounding this, of course, comes as what people are saying, well, why is it that Trump decided to replace her? Now, she was seen with Donald Trump as they were going through with Trump v. Barbara on the Supreme Court hearing for birthright citizenship. Now, if you've been keeping up with what was said there, I think it's interesting to note that the debates that are happening on the floor there concerning birthright citizenship and stuff that we can cover on another broadcast. However, I think very fascinating when they're looking at specific terminology that is being used when it comes to subject to jurisdiction thereof. These specific phrases and languages that were established by the writers of the 14th Amendment and how everything is sort of playing out. And will this be more in favor for Donald Trump, or will this be in favor for really the folks who want to keep this as the way it is, birthright citizenship? And, we'll see what it comes out to, what it turns out to be in the end, but it's not looking so good. Some are saying not looking so good. Some are saying, well, we don't know yet. So, however, this is what Donald Trump is saying, but what we saw with Reuters and what they're saying concerning Pam Bondi and what insiders are saying is because of the lack of her performance. So during her tenure as the top U.S. law enforcement official, Bondi was a combative champion of Trump's agenda, a loyalist. But of course, people are saying and speculating, this is from the New York Post, saying White House denies Pam Bondi fired over Eric Swalwell rumors, saying that she was the one who tipped Eric Swalwell off when it comes to the Fang files. Fang files. When it comes to Fang, a Chinese intelligence operative, Christina Fang. The outlet claimed Bondi begged Trump to reconsider her dismissal. However, Micah Beasley, a spokesperson for Swalwell's campaign for California governor, denied that the congressman was given any insight into the release of the FBI records. We had no heads up by anyone in the administration, none. So it says these stories would be laughable, if not so outrageous. An administration that is now at 33% approval is looking to blame anyone but the right people themselves. Now, if you remember that the Epstein files and what came out of that, when we first heard that the Epstein files were on Pam Bondi's desk, we were all rooting for Pam Bondi. And the types of responses that she gave during some of these congressional hearings were lazy at best. Now, albeit a lot of people favor her, a lot of people, favor her when it comes to her stance and her loyalty to Donald Trump and the administration. But we have to, I think, step somebody in who's going to do the job and do it effectively, and also be able to communicate effectively when it comes to issues like the Epstein files, because we know that the MAGA base was really rooting for the administration to fix all the problems that we're saying now. Affordability. We're talking about putting America first, bringing everything like gas, groceries, all these things that we need to address as a nation. We're hoping the administration, at least somewhat, many of those who voted for the administration, the Trump administration, hoping that America would turn around. But I think they were expecting it to turn around very quickly. Now, the reality of things turning around so quickly, being that we are a year into this presidency, wasn't going to happen. And we've talked about the delayed gratification effect. Delayed gratification would only come when when we're put into an uncomfortable situation, such as going through what we are witnessing in the Middle East, the Iranian war. Now, back to Pam Bondi for a moment here. Pam Bondi also replied here, or rather responded on X. This is her sort of response concerning her removal in her position. She says, over the next month, I will be working tirelessly to transition the Office of Attorney General to the amazing Todd Blanche before moving to an important private sector role I am thrilled about, and where I will continue fighting for President Trump and the administration. Leading President Trump's historic and highly successful efforts to make America safer and more secure has been the honor of a lifetime and easily the most consequential first year of the Department of Justice in American history. Since February 2025, we have secured the lowest murder rate in 125 years, secured first ever terrorism convictions against members of Antifa, shattered domestic and transitional gangs across the country, taken custody of more than 90 key cartel figures, and won 24 favorable rulings at the Supreme Court. I remain eternally grateful for the trust that President Trump placed in me to make America safe again. Now, a lot of people are talking about, well, this is a good thing that she's out. Todd Blanche, who's stepping in, look, maybe Trump and his administration, what they're seeking to do, and this might sound, what's the word for it? I don't know. You help me out with the word here. Starting to replace people like Kristi Noem, people like Pam Bondi, with more masculine figures. Now, it's sort of a speculation, obviously, but we do need men to rule, men to lead the nation. Now, this is not to say that women can't have powerful roles in government. Most certainly, there's a place for them to place their sort of trust in when it comes to certain positions in America. Because women are very detailed. But I think when it comes to the scrutiny, the level of scrutiny that was coming upon Pam Bondi was very harsh. Rightly so. She's the Attorney General of the United States of America. And so she must be mustered up for the job that is set before her. So when we looked at what happened to Kristi Noem after being removed, we saw reports like this. I think this is very interesting because there was a lot of this whole debacle with her husband. Quite fascinating, quite interesting. This is all sort of blowing up in bad ways.
Kristi Noem is asking for privacy and prayers tonight. She's said to be devastated by a report alleging her husband has been what is being called a cross-dressing double life. Senior national correspondent Rich Edson has details tonight. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. Well, former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and now President Trump are responding to a report regarding Noem's husband's alleged online activities. A spokesperson tells the Daily Mail that she's devastated and that, quote, the family was blindsided by this, and they ask for privacy and prayers at the time.
Now, Charlie, you say she's gone because she sat on her hands. And I think that was a big problem with a lot of folks, especially on the right or the conservatives. What do you want to call it? That she was not doing her job. And especially those with the Democrats, they had her beef with her. But they said that she wasn't doing her job as the Attorney General overseeing one of the biggest sort of cases that we're talking about concerning the Epstein files. That everybody wanted to see convictions across the board. They want to see the powerful elite, including many on the left, wanting to see Donald Trump and his sort of empire per se fall. Now, there is a sort of level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Failure, I guess I could say, when it comes to these Epstein files and how much it was sort of being elevated into this sort of public view, only to come to a article that was released via Axios Sunday night. Essentially that there's nothing here. There was really nothing in these files. So again, looking at this post here and what she's essentially going to be transitioning to, she's going to be transitioning into a private sector job. Now, what is that going to be? We don't know. Announcements coming soon. But the reason why we're seeing this sort of, this back and forth with, of course, left-wing media outlets and what the administration is saying, they're saying, look, I think they're keeping this messaging. There may be some animosity. There may be some type of things that we don't know. Obviously, they're keeping within the sort of circle of the administration in order to keep the peace so that it doesn't look like the administration is dividing. That's a hypothetical there. This is a sort of, I don't know. This is a theory, working theory. Because what Trump has been communicating and many others are saying, look, we don't want to divide within the MAGA movement. We're looking at midterms approaching rapidly, and what it looks like for the administration, for the right, for the conservatives, I guess you could say, is that it's not looking so good. That if the Democrats take the House, if the Senate, if it's sort of overwhelmed by Democrats, we know that they're going to try to probably push for another impeachment. And these are some of the ideas here that are circulating when it comes to this situation with Pam Bondi. And so I want to know your thoughts concerning that. But what we look at here and what people are speculating, those in the media, especially this clip that we'll play here, as to what could have caused this issue to happen, and following the birthright citizenship, following the tariff ruling by the Supreme Court, this idea that this might be the sort of tipping point as to why she was removed. Maybe. But of course, the infighting that we've been talking about, that people have been noticing, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, really sort of put everything, the MAGA movement, everything sort of put into question.
Supreme Court to hear the oral arguments.
Excellent point, Sandra, about the timing, because maybe that's when Trump finally made up his mind, because it looked he had to leave that oral argument thinking that he's going to take a loss on what is one of his core central policy agendas in immigration. He just lost a tariff case at the Supreme Court a few weeks ago. And maybe after sitting in the courtroom watching how his attorney general was in charge of representing these positions that the Supreme Court was doing, he said, maybe we need a change. Maybe I was persuaded to take these risky cases up to the Supreme Court And now that I see that we're on the lose, we've lost tariffs, we might very well lose on birthright citizenship, maybe I need to have different lawyers. Now, look, being President Trump's lawyer is not a long-term job, right?
Now, I want to know your thoughts concerning Pam Bondi. Do you think it was a good move by Donald Trump to remove her? I want to put up a little poll. Maybe we can get that going. But of course, if you're just joining in the broadcast, email us, freedom@equallyyokeshow.com. And of course, you can always put your comments in the chat so we can discuss this further. So what we're talking about here is this move by the president to remove Pam Bondi a good idea? Let's put that in the poll. Simple question, simple poll there. I want to get your thoughts. You say Charlie was killed, he wasn't assassinated. I think many are actually, even on the left. Well, maybe not on the left. I would say they would agree, many would agree that he was actually assassinated. This was an assassination, a political assassination, yes, and also a martyr. This is the reality that we're living through. A reality where we had somebody like Charlie Kirk who was holding together the base, where he spoke on behalf of the base because he spoke to so many college students. And we have an overwhelming yes on the polls right now. I want you guys to vote. But he was holding the base together concerning these issues because the reality of what is happening amongst the youth and the youth that moved 13 points towards Donald Trump's administration in the 2024 elections sort of are starting to shift their perspective and point of view, possibly looking for somebody like a moderate who portrays themselves as a moderate, such as what happened in Virginia, but then goes all in Democrat as they elect them into office. But switching gears here, as we let this poll sort of take shape here, what we've been witnessing over the last couple of days is the talk about aliens. Now, aliens is a sort of huge conspiracy theory. Whether extraterrestrials exist, whether the UFOs or Area 51, all these different topics that come up when it comes to aliens. J.D. Vance was asked, especially on what we saw with Obama, what he said concerning aliens, that aliens are real, but he hasn't seen them. Then Trump saying, look, what Obama said was actually classified information, essentially. And here's J.D. Vance's response to aliens. Quite interesting.
It's funny. When I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files. And then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peaked? Have you done a peak?
So I actually haven't. I have
full
not.
Independence Day.
I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it. Yeah. But I am going to. Trust me. I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Oh. Now, by the way, not me. You say Charlie was about to dump on Israel. I actually don't believe that's true. And we can actually see in his letter that talks about, really outlines how he wants to help the Israeli government and the ideas that he was putting forth, putting before Netanyahu concerning a press secretary for White House, a sort of way to communicate to the masses as to where the lies are concerning these types of warfares that they're fighting. They're a battle on 7 fronts. Now, we'll get to that in a moment, but let's sort of let's go back to this here, because I think what's fascinating about this is obviously the talk about aliens, but what JD Vance says concerning aliens.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet.
Not
Okay.
yet.
Some
Not
people
yet.
say they keep the UFOs in Ohio. You know, they might
Yeah,
be
Hangar
right
18, Hangar 18,
right
right?
under your nose the whole time.
I've heard that as well, but I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we're waiting for it. We saw aliens.
And you know me.
We saw
You know me.
aliens.gov.
I don't think they're
Yeah.
aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
Well, I can't let you go without a follow-up on that, because Barack Obama is on this podcast and he goes, "Yeah, aliens are real, but like, here's where they're not." You know,
I did not.
And so Obama
I
says,
didn't
"Yes,
hear that
aliens."
one.
He gets asked point blank, "Are aliens real?" He said, "Oh yeah," and then he goes, "But they're not at Area 51." And
Well, where are they?
Well, that's what he says. Right. There's a great question.
I need to
Trump
see
had to
this-
go save
I
him,
need
and
to
he
see
said
this
he's going to
podcast.
declassify.
Okay.
So you think they're demons?
Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe everything celestial, everything is otherworldly, to describe it as aliens. I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there, and there are things that are very difficult to explain. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extra natural phenomenon, that's where I go to, is the Christian understanding that, you know, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there. And I think that one of the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed.
That's deception. Deception at its finest, to say that there's life outside of this world, that we weren't created in God's image, that we weren't specially created for a specific purpose. All these ideas that begin to formulate concerning the idea or the conversation of aliens. We talk about what Todd Blanche is saying. We also see, this is Mike. What's his name? I forget his name. Mike. I think it's Mike something. I can't remember. We're talking about this briefing concerning aliens as well, that even Todd Blanche, what they've been talking about, what should be released to the public concerning aliens. Very, very interesting. No, Mike Gates. Michael Gates? Mike Gates? Let's hear his sort of side of the story. I think this is very fascinating.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. An actual uniformed member of the United States Army briefed me on that.
So many follow-up questions there, and I still want to argue with you so much about Swalwell, but now I'm like a dog, you know, with a bone. I gotta go. Okay, here we go. So this week, last Friday, the vice president sits across from me and goes, it's all demons. Like, it's probably demons. And he goes thermonuclear viral for that. We have so many clips of it. Like, it would take the rest of the show to it would take the rest of the show.
It was a great
You know,
interview.
like, everybody writes it up, and and everybody has a take on it. But so few people have like actually been uniquely interested in it and have actually done due diligence. And like, sorry for the side, you know, the side quest with Swalwell. I still want to talk about that, but I wanted to have you talk like in the spirit of full disclosure for the good of the American people, which I would argue should happen, whether it's Swalwell or UFOs or Epstein, quite frankly, or, by the way, Russiagate, which when you release all of the information, whether it's my Russiagate or
Well, that's
Trump's
going to
Russiagate,
result in a prosecution. The Russiagate stuff is going to get charged by the grand jury that is impaneled in the Southern District of Florida right now.
Yes.
That's the big RICO charge that we've all been waiting for. And the tell is the jurisdiction. The fact that
Now, when it comes to this subject of aliens and demonic beings, well, here's what Tim Burchett said concerning this. He said, if they would release the things that I've seen, you'd be up at night thinking about this stuff. I was briefed 2 weeks ago. It would have set the earth on, this country would have come unglued if they would have heard all that I've heard. Now, look, despite my biblical perspective on extraterrestrial beings and what what we've discussed about spiritual beings and what God says concerning these, I want to know your thoughts about aliens. Do you guys think there are extraterrestrial beings out there? Do you think that we're the only ones? I mean, so far we've had so much money pumped into the scientific community in order to figure this stuff out, and yet we have yet to find any sign of life anywhere that is intelligent life, similar to human beings. And would this upend the sort of understanding that we have, or would this change the Christian perspective concerning aliens? Now, I don't think it would change the perspective on Christians. Would they be indeed demonic beings? I think what's interesting is we talk about this hybrid breeding program. Now, I don't know if you heard it was mentioned when he talks about that they're sort of breeding them. Let's go back here.
Just need to be out in the public. I mean, I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication.
But where have we seen something like this before? Breeding with humans. If you look at the beginning of the Bible, look at Genesis chapter 6, it says here that when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, which is these angelic beings, saw the daughters of men, that they were attractive, and took them as wives as they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. This is where we get the idea of Nephilim. This scripture here talks about the breeding of these sons of God and the daughters of man, thus bringing us the Nephilim, which means giants. That's all it really means, is giant. And so we know, because of this specific act, we have some angels that were locked away in the Euphrates River because of this situation. So when we talk about whether these are demonic or angelic, well, the debate is still open. Say if aliens existed, that's fine. It means God created more. That doesn't mean that we were not made in his image. Possibly true. But I sort of hold to the idea that these are demonic beings. Why? Because nobody can actually, the public, despite what we've seen online, all the videos that you could actually capture what these are, we're probably looking at, honestly, technology that isn't revealed to the public being tested. And of course, we also see the deception done by the enemy, that is Satan, who will continue to try to, get people to believe in these lies of aliens. And we can go down this sort of rabbit trail, but we know that there is a spiritual issue regarding this, regarding aliens, I should say extraterrestrials. But we know there's a spiritual battle happening here on earth because of what is manifesting in the physical. And what is manifesting in the physical is, of course, showing itself across the Middle East we're seeing issues like an Iranian ballistic missile striking in central Israel, city of, I'm not even going to pronounce that. It's Petah Takva, I think, or Tikva, I'm not sure, as families meant to be celebrating Passover, one of the holiest periods of the Jewish year. And so you see this clip here. Quite insane when you witness what we're just seeing online. I mean, this is just what we see online. But what's interesting is you see that this is during Passover. Now, with Ilhan Omar's response prior to, the sort of, this is what, February 26th, before the attack in Iran, you see Ilhan Omar saying Iraq was attacked by the U.S. during Ramadan, and is sickening to know that the U.S. is again going to attack Iran during Ramadan. The U.S. apparently loves to strike Muslim countries during Ramadan, and I am convinced it isn't what these countries have done to violate international law, but about who they worship. And so people, there's some context that they wanted to add. There's a community note saying Iraq invasion began on March 20th, 2003, and major combat operations were declared over on May 1st. Months before Ramadan that year, survey also shows that Iran only about 37% of the population identifies as Muslim, which is quite interesting, while nearly half describe themselves as non-religious. But it's, of course, the religious fanatics of the Islamic fundamentalism group that rule over the Persian people. These are the same people that lie on the US media that say we're the ones that are in control here. We shut down the internet. We shut down the internet so that, we need to control the narrative here. Why that we can see that they're controlling the narrative is because, one, the people, if they don't have access to internet, they're only getting state-sponsored news, which is showing nothing but propaganda that the U.S. is losing, that they're not accomplishing anything. But where was Ilhan Omar? You see any posts about Iran or the Islamic regime firing on the Jewish nation? None at all. None. No response. She doesn't care. Nothing. That's who Ilhan Omar is. That's who she is. That's just the prime Ilhan Omar that we know. The liar, really the bigot. It's just crazy. So when we begin to see this stuff, and let me look at your comments here, because I want to know what you guys are thinking. You're watching from Greece. Welcome. I appreciate you for being on this show. If you guys want to subscribe to the podcast, please subscribe to the podcast. And of course, this will help push these tech oligarchs from even touching this channel, in the sense that we continue to grow the channel. Look, God can do anything. God can remove this channel. God can anything. They can, these AI bots that will survey channels and remove them. This channel has gotten removed before, but I want to try to defeat those tech oligarchs by you just hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button. Let's get this video out there. And so you say universe is a big place. It very much is. The expanse of the universe is so massive. Yet, for the amount of years that we've observed the universe, we still have yet to find life. That's the reality of it. And so the situation with Artemis 2 actually going past the moon, I want to know your guys' thoughts here. I'm going to end this poll here. We're going to look at this. I'm going to look at this here for a moment. This is Artemis 2. Okay, so they're going to fly by the moon. And let me see if I can actually get you guys some B-roll here, because This was earlier yesterday, and I actually thought it was an April Fool's joke. I didn't even think it was legitimate. But when we see that they are actually legitimate, the Orion completes TLI burn, crew begins journey to the moon. This is NASA. After the mission management team pulled go, the spacecraft fired its main engine for 5 minutes and 50 seconds, beginning at 7:49 p.m. It says to successfully complete the translunar injection burn, sending the crew in Orion out of Earth orbit on a trajectory towards the moon. Now, I have many people that I know personally that actually don't believe that we ever went to the moon. That actually think that, well, no, this is all a conspiracy theory. Interesting. What do you guys think concerning that? You guys think that we actually went to the moon? Do you guys think that we actually, some of my friends think that we can't get past the barrier, the ozone layer, that we will begin to burn up. And so this has to be fake. And then I asked, well, what about this space station? Well, it sits below a certain, area in orbit so that, all this stuff. I think we actually went to the moon. Or whether it was, people think that this was broadcast, television, that they created a set and, you could see certain things. I think people are reaching on this. I don't know. It's just my thought. And so this was some of the footage earlier. We saw them, launch. See if we can actually get to some of the footage here of them actually taking off. But otherwise, this is quite a fascinating feat here when we're looking at and witnessing the possibility, especially what SpaceX is doing, where they are looking to create bases on the moon. And it's, by the way, it's not about having low IQ friends. I think there's just these conspiracies that people go down these rabbit trails and they think, well, I don't really believe it because the evidence, they try to look at it. I don't know, all this stuff. This is the flywheel used a simple cables-based mechanism that supports both aerobic exercises like rowing and resistive movements such as squats and deadlifts. Operating much like a yo-yo, the device provides resistance proportional to the force applied, allowing loads of up to 400 pounds. This capability is especially important in deep space, where astronauts do not have access to the extensive exercise equipment aboard the International Space Station. On the station, crews rely on more than 4,000 pounds of exercise hardware spread across roughly 850 cubic feet. In contrast, Orion's flywheel weighs just 30 pounds and is about the size of a carry-on suitcase, meeting the strict mass and volume constraints of deep space missions while still supporting crew health and re-entry readiness. International Studio Station. I think that's actually kind of funny. So they're doing a flyby. That's essentially what they're doing. They're on the path to the moon, and they circled to get the trajectory, towards the moon. This is a 10-day mission here. 10-day mission flyby. Began building a lunar targeting plan, a guide to what the crew will look at on the moon surface during its approximately 6-hour observation on Monday, April 6th. Now, this is actually interesting. If you've seen some of the video footage that looks incredible. Look at that. You can only like see the lights. You can't even see the outline of the spacecraft. If you've actually seen, and look, I get your comment here. You say, why don't the Artemis 2 live streams show any real images? Yeah, they started showing some like, you know, what is this, like 3D animations? Look, there's some places where I'm skeptical, some places, well, you know, I think maybe we're reaching here. Maybe there's some reason behind it. I don't know. That's a good question. It's way out of my field of expertise here. This stuff is interesting, but I don't really dive too much into this. I just find that the fact that we're trying to go to the moon again, well, will it actually happen? So hopefully they broadcast some footage. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Who knows? So I just thought that interesting. So, guys, I'm going to end the stream here. If you guys liked what you heard, subscribe to the podcast. Please like and share. And we'll be coming back to you live. Lord willing, tomorrow we'll be going through some more information as everything begins to develop. There's so much in the news that we are covering. And so I want you to keep it locked here. Subscribe to the podcast, put your notification bells, and email me your thoughts, freedomandequalityoakshow.com. We'll continue back here on the next, updates concerning political stuff, biblical stuff, maybe real footage from the Artemis 2 mission. Possibly. We'll see. You say, I'd like to see a live stream of Artemis approaching the moon. I mean, come on. It's 2026, dude. They should be more than capable of doing this. Send some satellites in the air, connect somehow. I don't know. I'm sure they can figure this out. I'm sure it's not a big deal. Anyway. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. God bless.
Jurisdiction thereof, and the clause means not owing allegiance to anybody else. And in 1884, this court recognized that subject to the jurisdiction means owing direct and immediate allegiance. The clause thus does not extend citizenship to the children of temporary visa holders or illegal aliens. Unlike the newly freed slaves, those visitors lack direct and immediate allegiance to the United States. For aliens, lawful domicile is the status that creates the requisite allegiance, and the text of the clause presupposes domicile. For decades following the clause's adoption, commentators recognize that the children of temporary visitors are not citizens, and illegal aliens lack the legal capacity to establish domicile here. Unrestricted birthright citizenship contradicts the practice of the overwhelming majority of modern nations. It demeans the priceless and profound gift of American citizenship. It operates as a powerful pull factor for illegal immigration and rewards illegal aliens who not only violate the immigration laws, but also jump in front of those who follow the rules. It has spawned a sprawling industry of birth tourism as uncounted thousands of foreigners from potentially hostile nations have flocked to give birth in the United States in recent decades, creating a whole generation of American citizens abroad with no meaningful ties to the United States. I welcome the court's questions.
General Sauer, before we get into the broader national issues, would you start with Dred Scott? Dred Scott was a case about state citizenship. It was a diversity case. And of course, we know what Chief Justice Taney did with that. How does the Citizenship Clause respond specifically to Dred Scott and answers or changes or corrects its answer as to citizenship? The other point is the Citizenship Clause refers not just to national citizenship, but also to state citizenship. Are we to have two different definitions for those? It's one word, citizens of the United States and citizens of the state wherein they reside. So as you begin, I'd like you to go back at the beginning and be more specific about the answer, and I want you to explain whether or not those two definitions are the same or related, and what state citizenship is based on.
Thank you, Justice Thomas. I'll maybe start by addressing Dred Scott. As you alluded to the fact, Dred Scott, imposed one of the worst injustices in the history of this court, and it led to the outbreak of the Civil War. It's very clear, and this court in all of its early cases interpreting the 14th Amendment said the one pervading purpose, the main object of the Citizenship Clause is to overrule Dred Scott and establish the citizenship of the freed slaves. And if you look at the debates in the congressional record and discussion surrounding the adoption of the Citizenship Clause, what you see is a very clear understanding that the newly freed slaves and their children have a relationship